77 WABC is celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Now live from Studio 77 in New York City.
Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York.
It's the Martin Luther King Jr. Day Roundtable. Now, here's Dominic Carter.
Everyone, and thank you for joining us. In a moment, we'll introduce the esteemed panel that we have, but we have to start with the man and the lady that makes everything possible here at 77 WABC, and that's Margot Katzimatidis and John Katzimatidis. And Mr. Katzimatidis, from my heart, as I toss it to you now, I want to thank you for what you and your wife do to make this city and our country a better city, a better country, what you do to improve race relations, to help children, and on and on and on. Thank you, Mr. Katzimatidis.
Thank you, Dominic Carter. Here at WABC, our function is getting New York closer together. And today, on Martin Luther King's birthday, on 2023, I am proud to be hosting an all-day session at WABC with leading African-American, Black American, Caribbean Black Americans that will tell us how much better the world is under Martin Luther King. And I said something this morning to a few friends of mine, and I said, Martin Luther King will go down in history. It will be Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King that helped the Black people the most. Thank you, Dominic.
Thank you, Mr. Katzimatidis. To my right, we have longtime city leader in the city of New York, Jania Butler. Thank you for joining us. To my left, we have a legendary deputy mayor of New York City, Rudy Washington. Thank you for joining us. And so I just want to put the question out there. I want us to have a roundtable discussion. If you have something to say, come on in. You don't have to wait for a question. But what would Dr. King, and I know this is a tough question, but what would he think about the world that we live in today? I'll just throw it out there to the panel.
Well, I am worried. Martin Luther King was a man of peace. He was a religious man, a man of peace, and some of the things that have been happening the last year or two under COVID, under Black Lives Matter, I think he would be very much concerned.
Absolutely. I think that leading from his last sermon of I had a dream, I think part of his dream came to life, but I think that it's not yet finished and the movement must continue. And I think that he would say today that we have to continue the fight and the struggle and really dig deeper than from where we've came in the last 60 years.
When you say not finished, elaborate, please.
Meaning that, you know, in our urban communities around the country, that there's civil unrest. The education system is not right. Our young people don't have the dream. They haven't realized what the American dream is. I don't even know if they're dreaming today. And so I think, but at the same time, there's been many facets that have worked with people coming together. When he said all races, all creeds, and everybody coming together. So I think that certain things have worked, but there's just more work to do. And I don't think that there'd ever be a time in our lifetime that we don't have to stop the work.
Deputy Mayor Rudy Washington.
Yeah, I guess, Dominic, you gave me a minute to think about it. I guess the greatest impact that Dr. King had was on the United States. However, those of us from the baby boom era knows that he also focused on Vietnam, and that was the hot button issue of the day. However, I look around the world today. I mean, February will be 1 year. I was just shocked when Russia invaded Ukraine. I thought we were beyond that type of violence in one country trying to rule another country. and you look at the hot spots around the world, and I believe Dr. King would have been really troubled. The Middle East wasn't percolating the way it was back in the 60s. That's a hot spot. Taiwan, China, Russia, Ukraine, and as Ms. Butler just said, right here in the United States, the unrest. And I'm really bothered because I look at generations now, Dominic, coming up behind us, that don't even know about Pearl Harbor, don't know about George Washington Carver, don't know about, for that matter, 9/11, which is the recent past. And you mentioned Dr. King, and I would imagine a lot of young people are not even aware of the work that he did in this country, not to mention globally.
Well, I want the three of you to respond to this, and piggybacking on your comment, Deputy Mayor, when we look at Dr. King's legacy, and I'm going to start with you, Ms. Butler, on this one, has his legacy been fulfilled?
Wow. You want to say yes, like immediately you want to say yes.
You're right.
But you can't.
You're right,
right?
You're right.
Because there's been so many things. Like for me, I've worked with the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. for the last 15, 16 years. And, so I've been under his tutelage. And so he always says, keep hope alive, right? And so when he says, what I learned when he says the keep hope alive, it's the keep the dream alive, right? And so know his legacy, it had, no, I can't say yes. But I can say that there's hope. And I can say that there's people and that there's enough soldiers on the ground that if we join together and we join our forces, I think that's what's happening is the kind of divide and conquer theory, whereas though that all the people are doing programming and people are doing things, but we're not coming together, and we need the manpower to really come together and bring it together. Like back in the day, we had less communication, less social media, but we had more power as a community, more power as a people, because everybody put in from all over the country. And we kind of need that now. Everybody's like all over the place and stuff like that. But I believe that if we all put in Republicans, Democrats, independents, people who don't even participate in the political system, and everybody adds something, I think that legacy can be realized.
Mr. Katsimatidis, when I asked the question of has Dr. King's legacy been fulfilled, when you look at your companies, when you look at WABC, what I can speak to firsthand experience, it has been fulfilled. And the way that you carry out this radio station, and this is not personal about me, but having me in high-profile assignments, having other people of color in all of the different departments here at WABC, but societal-wise, in your opinion, has Dr. King's legacy been fulfilled?
I'm trying to remember back. I was a youngster when Dr. King was around. And in the 1950s, 1960s, people were still seeing color. They would look at a new employee and say they would see color. I'm going to throw a number out. I'm not sure how close I am. In the 1960s, 50% of the people. Maybe even more. Right now, I think it's up to 90% that people don't see color anymore. They see people. They see how good is that person going to do a job. They don't say, oh, he's Asian, or he's black, or whatever. And I think we've come, how do they say it? We've come a long way, baby. And I think he would be proud of how much we came. We've had a black president. We have a black mayor. We have a black attorney general in New York State. We've come a long way. And I think he'd be happy about that. But I think he'd not be happy over so many black individuals that are trying to take advantage of their blackness to stir people up.
I agree with you. And Deputy Mayor Washington, I'm speaking for myself, not for Mr. Catsimatidis. I think we all support, all of us, if there is an injustice in society, people have a right to protest. People have a First Amendment right to do so. But you don't have a right, and I'm referring to many of the activists with Black Lives Matter, you don't have a right to take advantage of the situation for personal gain. You don't have a right to all of a sudden become very wealthy with real estate properties and so on. So when I ask you the same question I put to them about the divide and so on, well, I didn't get to the full divide yet, but Dr. King in terms of his legacy being fulfilled. So I agree with what's been said, but it does bother me, or at least me, that there are some out there that look just like you and I that are taking advantage of the situation or attempting to.
Well, once again, I guess I'll make the provocative statements.
Go for it.
And at the moment, I read a lot. So right now, I started with all of the presidents, the major presidents. But right now, I'm reading LBJ.
Okay.
And I started reading LBJ because, actually, because of the approach of Dr. King's holiday. And I feel, in a lot of ways, hold on now.
Okay.
The Great Society were probably the worst thing that happened to us. The whole notion of society giving you something.
Guess what, Deputy Mayor? I agree with you 1,000%.
Right.
I agree with you 1,000%. And for example, and I want you to finish because I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I agree with you so strongly. I believe that Moynihan was right.
He was.
With a lot of the things that he said.
Defining DVC down.
Yes, and the welfare system. So I agree with you. I believe that if people need help, and I grew up on public assistance and without a dad in my life, but if people need help, you give it to them. But not where it's cycles and cycles and generations and generations. Please continue.
You know, when, and John can relate to this, growing up in Harlem, I remember, you know, John and I not too far apart in age, but I remember all of the corner stores were black owned. I don't know what area y'all grew up in, but in Jamaica, South Jamaica, all of the stores, corner stores in the black community were black owned. The dry cleaners were black owned. The small, they're called boutique stores today, you know, little small shoe stores and stuff, they were black owned. The undertakers were, you know, the funeral homes were all black owned. Well, guess what? Today in New York, we don't have any type of foundation economically. None. You know, people call me up all the time because before I was deputy mayor, I was commissioner of the Department of Business Services, and I ran the Small Business Administration for the city, you know, minority program. So people still to today call me up and says, Rudy, do you know a minority person? But, you know, you're hard pressed to come up with one name. And that's sad when you consider, you know, New York City is the epicenter of the United States, for that matter, the world, and probably have one of the largest black communities in the country. And you can't point to any real black businesses. You can find one or two, but it ends there. I'm very troubled, Dominic, when I ride through our communities and I see our young men standing out in front of the local store with their pants hanging down around their rear end. That really bothers me, and I talked in my opening statement about knowing what 9/11 was, what Pearl Harbor was, what all our seminal moments in this country's development, even the March on Washington, and Dr. King himself. In the statements he said, you know, I play his speeches when my kids were young, so they would hear the speeches. Today, we don't have radio stations for the most part playing his speeches. I mean, you may catch a clips on one of the networks. So I commend my dear friend, I call him Cat, for doing this, to get this out there, because I don't know, a country that doesn't know where it's been definitely won't know where they're going. And we as a country, we're on a path, and you said it, that I'm not sure where we're going as a country, and I'm sure that would have bothered Dr. King. John, you being a business person, I mean, what's happening with this whole notion? And yesterday, Dominic, I was just reading online where there's like 7 or 8 known and proud to say it socialists within the state assembly, and planning on running their agenda. I mean, so this is troubling. I mean, this whole green movement, without any opposition, no debate, no discussion, and people don't realize, I think we're up to, as of this morning, 8 whales that have washed ashore along the Jersey, New York coast, because they're pounding the floor of the ocean to put these windmills up, and they're pounding the floor to find where to put them, and it's killing the whales. So, my wife said,
is that what it is?
yeah. So my wife said, where the whale people? Why aren't they saying something? Nobody's saying anything. I mean, so all of this is the social injustice that Dr. King talked about. And one of his favorite statements of mine, I believe it goes, and I know you would know, both of you, when you hear it, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it tends to bend toward justice, which basically means we will get to the right place, but we got some troubled times in front of us.
Well, can I say that I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. So growing up for me, I think part of Dr. King's dream was realized, right? Because my parents were able to come from, my mother was born in Philadelphia, my dad in Delaware, what they call Delaware Township. And I was able to grow up in an upper middle class area, right? So I got a great education. When we took a look at my brothers who are black, and we look at everybody, nobody is going to jail, right? So it's education, right? But then when I started working for Reverend Jackson, my job was to connect the civil rights with the hip hop community, and that was cut off. So when you say that what happened, and there's a big disconnect, right? So there was, and then my aunt, who she passed away last year, but she was 90. I want to say she was like 91. She said, I think Reverend Jackson's generation was the last generation that really did it, and that blew my mind. What do you mean, Reverend Jackson's generation? And so there was a whole different mentality that came before us. Now, I have to say that I'm a part of the hip hop community where there's entrepreneurship. And what I had to do with Reverend Jackson was say, look at what we're doing. Like, we don't know where we're going. We don't know what we're supposed to be doing, but there's something there. And so we need to connect those dots. We need to build that leadership. And I think before the Reverend Jacksons and everybody passes away that came before us that know what we should be doing needs to grab hold, because the young man with his pants hanging down, it's education. He doesn't get it, right? So he's standing there trying to make
to fit in.
Yeah. To what? Though, to this jail culture. And so they've been fed a different mentality. And so we've been taught to go in the wrong direction. Right. But I've worked in Rikers Island, homeless services, the Boys and Girls Club, and you can change them. But it's the conversation. Right? I tell them, you have to learn how to play the game. I have a guy right now that I'm so proud of that works for Bowery Residence Committee. He's a clinical coordinator for homeless services. He had a murder charge when he came in to me, 2006. He had a murder charge, but he got his degree while he was locked up. He said he did 20 years in jail, and he got his degree. So now he's sitting in front of me and saying, I need a job. Where do I get this job? How do I get this job? Right? And so Bowery Residents Committee under Muzzy Rosenblatt, they give people the opportunity, right?
Tell Muzzy I said
exactly, right? It worked for him. And, but I had to sign my name on the line for this young man. And I had to work with him and say, and they said, well, Jania, are you going to vouch for him?
That's a lot.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
But it took that. And so today I had a conversation with him last week. He's a clinical coordinator at Bowery Residents Committee, where he started out as a janitor, a case manager, was in the homeless services, and now he's a clinical coordinator over there. And so Muzzy was able to give him.
I know that history.
Ernest.
I know him.
Yes.
They had terminated him, and I gave him back his job.
Really?
Yes. Because HR found out about his record.
Well, they knew about this gentleman's record because I wrote it.
It was the way he filled it out. It was, and the case came in front of me.
Really?
I'm listening to the facts.
Yeah, you know it.
Because, we had to take a leap of faith on this guy.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to do. And I think that's the small pieces. Like, I think that when we look at the people on the streets, we get a little nervous. What are you doing? Why are you doing that? And don't give them the opportunity. But it is the confidence to say, hey, come here. Like I said, I've been on Rikers Island, so I know, come here. Get this right, and we're going from here. And that's kind of what we have to do that.
Let me just say this, tossing to Mr. Catsimatidis for a second. You mentioned, and this is important, both of you, what you're talking about is a leap of faith in getting there. And Mr. Catsimatidis, I know for a fact, does that on a regular in terms of taking a leap of faith in people that maybe society says he shouldn't, but he does it anyway. And so what I've noticed, and we're talking about Dr. King, Mr. Catsimatidis, but you are very comfortable, I'm just being honest, in the black community. Very, very comfortable in the community. Why? And why is race relations so important to you?
I think it's important. It comes back to New York City. I love our city. All of us have been successful in our city. And keeping our city together and having everybody together makes it a better city. And those people that are trying to tear it apart, I am ashamed of. Now, the one thing about, Rudy, you mentioned about our political leaders, I am concerned about the political leadership that is scared to stand up to the socialist leadership. Because it seems like they don't have the courage just to say no.
You're right.
And that's the one part I am very, very disappointed in, because what's right is right. I think we all know what's right and wrong.
Well, what I think, Dominic, that's really impacting the black community also is the fact that during what generation I want to say, let's say baby boomers, life was easily defined, especially in the cities. Basically, it was black and white. In the South, my parents were sharecroppers, and we came north. Life was simple. It was black and white. And as people were forced to live close to each other and they began to realize the commonality, it made things a lot easier. When you looked at New York City in the 60s, it was black and white, and everybody else was 1 or 2%. And it was probably easier to move forward then. But now you look at New York City, we interviewed David Banks on Cats at Night, and he gave the statistics that the public school system is now 51% Latino. And when I say Latino, as you know, Dominic, being a reporter, they're not monolithic. We're talking Mexicans, we're talking Chileans, Ecuadorians, and and everybody has their. So you have that dynamic working. Now that's a predominant dynamic, and we're now like 12%. He said within the public school system, and then you look at the other groups that historically in the 60s it was basically black and white, but now with all these new dynamics. And now we also have something almost akin to Great Britain, where there is a social construct or a class construct that's developing. And African Americans, I feel we're getting lost in that struggle. And we don't have the unifying voices. Take Reverend Jackson. We don't have those unifying voices now. We have demagogues who seek to, manipulate this whole situation.
Yes.
So that they can benefit financially. I mean, so is it about the greater good of the city? Is it about the greater good of African Americans? No. George Floyd's situation, what happened that summer, the summer of 2020 and going into the fall, it was, I was scratching my head. And like John said, local leadership wouldn't stand up and say, enough's enough. We're not letting people burn down cities all across the country. And
for what?
For what? And when you looked at the people on the lines, who were picketing, they weren't black people. So you would look at that. Now they manipulated young black men to riot,
Right.
but by day, it was another group, and it's like they're attacking capitalism, the foundation of this country, what made us who we are as a country. So there are some dynamics at work here that I have not fully heard anybody tackle, and at some point we need to.
Well, let me say that I think that they're attacking black ignorance, right? And so they're attacking the fact that we don't know the political
They
system.
manipulate.
Yeah, exactly. Manipulating us to the 10th power. And then this is why WABC is great, because there's a lot of media whoremongers that are out there that just want the attention and put the camera on me and I'll say anything and, I'll send the troops running. And I think a lot of that happened with the George Floyd situation, where you're burning down your own city, you're taking away from your own self, and I don't think that we understand that process. And if you look at the snatch and grabs and see, it still goes on now. If you look at like every 10 years, there's like a big riot somewhere, right? Every 10 to 15 years. But what they're doing is sending another group of young black men to jail because they're thinking we're doing something by knocking, down windows. And now you have these people that are running into diamond stores and, doing the snatch and grabs and things like that. And all these things that, if we focus on the education, if we focus on where these young people are at, because what's happening is that these young people, I seen from the time that they're 5, they're experiencing death. Right? So they're turning into these young murderers and young, very just heartless folks by what they're seeing in their communities. And so again, when I grew up, nothing of the sort, so it's not black or white, it's what they're seeing, it's what they're being presented with. And so I think that we have to cut off those things and understand what's happening and change the direction. And once we change that direction, if we're able to get that flow, then Dr. King, when he says if you can't run, if you can't walk, run, and if you can't run, crawl, and everything like that, when Dr. King says all those things, that is there. The American dream can be realized, but it has to be realized in a way that is unified and guided.
Would you say, Ms. Butler, that Dr. King would look at this situation and say, people of goodwill better come together because we're all under attack right now. There is a force
Yes.
That's attacking America and all our systems and institutions. I scratch my head.
I'm with you, Deputy Mayor. I do the same thing. So we're in unison. We have only about 5 minutes left. Mr. Catsimatidis, I do want to address this to you because I've found this remarkable. And I know that you two know this part about Mr. Catsimatidis. I was a PAL kid, Police Athletic League. My grandmother didn't have much. They would feed me, take me on summer camp programs and so on. And I've watched in total amazement. There's a point to where I'm going here. In total amazement, every single year in December, this billionaire gets up and quietly, with no fanfare, goes up to the PAL Center in Harlem, 119th and Morningside Avenue, by himself, and sets up. I've watched him do this year after year. The Christmas party, I've watched him and his wife pay for bicycles for the kids. And it touches my heart because I was once one of those kids. And he's giving these kids hope for the future. So with the few minutes we have left, Mr. Catsimatidis, and I want to go around the table, let's try and end on a positive note in terms of hope and Dr. King. And where do we go from here to improve race relations, to improve life for everyone, in particular for African Americans? Where do we go from here? Because I've watched you year after year with the PAL Center and what you're doing. And frankly speaking, Mr. Catsimatidis, those kids look a lot like the three of us in the PAL Center. And you do this every single year.
Dominic, when it comes down to young boys and girls, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, those kids deserve a break. What I said, and the other problem is they are one parent. 70% of the people in our inner city are one-parent homes. So if the mother is working, then those kids, if they go out, they have choices. They can go to a PAL Center and be relatively safe and learn. Or they can go to the local candy store, pizza shop, like the old days, and get in trouble. Other people would come up to them, say, I just got a brand new car because I was selling drugs. We have to save as many young kids as possible because that's the future of our city and our country. I talked to Mayor Adams on Sunday, and I said to Mayor Adams, the big decision is we can't afford to save the whole world. We can't afford to save, the American people are generous people, but we can't afford to save everybody in South America, everybody in Central America. And then I said to him, how about saving the American poor first?
Agreed.
Let's take care of the American poor first before we decide to worry about the rest of the world. There's not enough money in the world to help them. And by having that kind of flux and all those people just coming into our country, depending on us to make a living, putting them up in hotels, $275 million he's spending on 5,000 families. There's 5,000 American families that love to be able to be put up in hotels and given food and given a cell phone. I am very much concerned. And Mayor Adams, I believe he agreed with me.
Well, thank you, Mr. Catsimatidis. Ms. Butler or Deputy Mayor, whoever wants to go first. In terms of, we're wrapping this up, we're down to the last couple of minutes. Looking towards the future, what do you think needs to be done? You addressed this, Ms. Butler, in terms of the young people, and so did you, Deputy Mayor, in terms of the young men walking around with the jeans on on their backsides, and it breaks my heart every time I see it. You addressed it as well as a lack of a foundation, a lack of an education. But in light of this King Day 2023, looking ahead, what needs to be done? And these are your final thoughts. I guess we'll go with you, Deputy Mayor.
Well, I have to agree with Ms. Butler that it all comes down to education. That is the pathway. But it also rests upon family. I believe it was 63 where a census was done. 20 in the black community, I think it was 21% or 22% of all kids were born out of wedlock. As of today, we're 70% born out of wedlock. So, and you see it. Yesterday in church, we were 2 seats away from a young family, and the kid was performing all over the place, and the young parents just sit there, and did nothing. It was disrupting the service. And if that was me, my mother would have said, "Pow, pow," in my mind. I would have been, that wouldn't happen.
Right.
Then I would, if I was really out of hand, I had to face my father.
Right.
I mean, those days are gone. That was the foundation. And Ms. Butler's right. Education and the family. You fix those 2 things, everything else takes care of itself. Like I said before, we were sharecroppers and had meatless days. But my father said, there's not going to be no welfare here. He would not let the family go on welfare. We went without meat, period. We ate potatoes for dinner.
And what year was this, Deputy Mayor?
60s.
And he understood the importance of no dependency here for my
Right.
family. If you don't get out there and
Right.
work and earn it, it will not exist.
Exactly.
Well, thank you. And Ms. Jania Butler, your final thoughts here?
Yes, and I think that the family, I'm like, I got tears coming to my eyes because I'm flushed with the fact that my mom and dad, they struggled to put a family together for my brother and I, and that we sat down at a table every night and had dinner and things like that. And that's not happening. Maybe
Right.
even 3 generations deep, right? That's not happening. So when you say the parent is not doing anything, Mr. Washington, they're not, the kid is acting up and they don't know what to do.
Exactly.
But what I've learned in working, because I wondered, why when I grew up, I always wondered, why does my mom and dad have me in this white area where I want to be around my own community? And I wondered until I got to the black community, until I understood, oh my God, they protected me. Oh my God, they cared about me. They were protecting our minds, and they were giving us an opportunity that not everybody got. So I spent my time going into Rikers Island and believing that this community could change, and they can. And so what needs to happen is when you see something that you don't like, don't be scared of it, because they're really challenging us to say, if you care about me, reach out that hand like Mr. Casamatides does, like Muzzy does at BRC and all these other companies. Like, reach out that hand. When I had to sign my name on that dotted line and say, I'm going to vouch for this guy and give this guy a chance. That's what we have to do going forward. And we have to look at the community that we have, may not be working now, and shift that. And look at these young people and say, look, we have to send you in different directions. So while we have, Eric Adams as our mayor that understands this, we have to use this time to dig deep and go in there and say, hey, we're changing that direction. And and people like myself are out here that are willing to say, I'll go in there and do the tough stuff. And there's a lot of other people like that. So I think that's what we need to do going forward. And I think Dr. King will be proud that we're ready to go into the trenches.
And the final word, Mr. Catsimatidis, you put this together each and every year, and we're very thankful for what you and your wife, Margot, do. Thank you for doing this. You have the final word as the man that put this together with all the great food out there and the vision behind this each and every year. The final word.
I hope this panel serves as an example to have more discussion around our city, around our country, of what's the next step in the Martin Luther King legacy.
Thank you, Mr. Katsimatidis, and I also thank your lovely wife, Margot Katsimatidis. She's somewhere around here. To my left, Deputy Mayor Rudy Washington. Thank you for your service to New York City and for all that you've done. To my right, Jania Butler, a city leader in New York City, someone who's on the front line each and every day. Not just talking the talk, she's out there, this sister is out there doing the work. And the man that does a lot for New York, a lot for this country, the man that has turned around WABC, the man that puts his money in. He doesn't just talk, he is a leader, as I mentioned, in the community with the kids on a Saturday morning, with black kids, Latino kids, the owner-operator of WABC, John Katsimatidis. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ms. Butler. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And we thank all of you at home, and folks, you have a lovely day. Thank you. Thank you, we're done. Great job.